just for posterity. So all that we've done is open the file, pressed 4. I left click, drag over everything. And then I'm shift clicking the mesh. Next step is we need our rigging menu set. So go to this little drop down at the top left and find the rigging tab, this one right here. And then you'll see that you get a bunch of different options. What we're looking for is skin. So we're gonna go to skin, bind skin, but we're gonna go to the option box here. I wanna make sure that your options are good. And so bind to, go to joint hierarchy. You're looking for joint hierarchy in here. And bind method, geodesic voxel is fine, but we're gonna replace all these weights anyways, so it doesn't really matter. Make sure your max influences are on 5. If we go to, if you drag this down to 1, you couldn't do any sort of blending between the joints when you're after we get these rigged. So you need at least 2. I like going for 5, maybe 4 is also fine. Especially for this, like I don't imagine getting much more than 4, but let's just do 5 to be safe. And then you're gonna do bind skin. So remember, that's joint hierarchy, geodesic voxel, max influence is 5. And this is the bind skin options. You'll find that under skin, bind skin, option box, right? If you can't find that skin button, it's under the rigging menu in here. So we just selected our joints, selected our mesh, went to the rigging menu, skin, bind skin. We went to the options, joint hierarchy, geodesic voxel, max influences 5. And let's click bind skin. Ooh, it's gonna think for a little bit. And then you'll see that your mesh is now, I think it's pink. I'm a little bit colorblind. That's a lie. I'm a lot bit colorblind, very colorblind. So it's hard for me to see what this is, but I think it's magenta or some sort of pink. And then now let's move around our controls and you'll see, ooh, that hand is now moving. And I just left click on the controls. Don't see when we're moving our characters around, we don't mess with the joints directly because those joints have some information on them that we want to keep intact, and we want to make sure that we're not breaking our rig. So once you bind your mesh to your joints, you're going to want to go up to the channel box up here. Now, channel box is in the top right tab right here. Depending on your UI, because you can drag these tabs out anywhere. But you're going to go to your channel box. You can click it. The channel box looks like this. If you select something, it has all the values in it, as we've seen throughout the class. And if you can't find it from this tab, there's always this top right button right here. It's right under this workspace thing to the right. It says show hide channel box. So you can click that and you can find it that way too. Now what we want to do is we want to turn our joints layer right here to reference. And the way you do that is you just double click this rightmost box in here. Sorry, I'm trying not to sneeze. Oh man. Sometimes the body just fights you. So yeah, make sure your joints layer is on reference mode. And that's gonna make it so we can't click our joints anymore. So if I turn this reference off and I drag select over something, say I wanted to select the mesh, and I'm like, I'll just drag select over it. It's gonna select the joints instead. Joints have the highest priority, and it gets really annoying and dangerous. I don't know why they're so high priority. But it gets really dangerous because then you're like, oh, I'm on this. And if you accidentally delete a joint, then my God, you messed everything up. So don't delete joints after you've bound them. or any of that. Especially on like downloaded rigs, like don't delete any controls. If you're like, oh, I don't need this control anymore, don't just willy-nilly go in and delete it. So yeah, joints layer, make sure that's on reference mode like this, and I can no longer just select those straight up. Oh, I can apparently select something in here. What was that? What was that? I was able to select something in there, and it was kind of selecting a. Is it the? Oh, it's one of these controls. Okay, so that's making it look like I'm selecting the joints, but I'm not. That's just the main control. So moving on, you'll see that when you move these controls, let's go back into 5 mode. When you move these controls, and I'm just clicking on the cube right now for the wrist, and I'm pressing W, and I'm going to move this around. You can see how that is bound to the skeleton. You can see that like this joint in here is kind of pulling on these verts. If we rotate it, you can really clearly see it as well. And when we rotate it like this downward, you can see that the wrist is not controlling these verts, right? Like it's pulling a little bit too much or too little on these verts right there. And you can see that they're crumpling in a kind of unappealing way. So our job when we're skinning is to fix stuff like that. And there's people that do only that for work. And I want to make sure you guys know that like there's a lot of potential jobs out there in 3D. Like there's people that only model and only texture. Modeling and texturing used to be 2 different disciplines, but over the past like 20 years, those kind of have merged together. Now instead what they do is they kind of separate it out into character modeling and environment modeling. And then you get to you focus on one of those, and then you get really good at it, and then you're just a boss at it, and then you can get a nice little jobby job. So yeah, our goal now is to get nice blending of the kind of controlling weights of each of these joints. And our default bind is like decent for our elbow, but I want to show you guys the proper way. We're going to walk through the proper way to do this assignment. And as you can tell, I'm going pretty slow. I'll keep it nice and steady for you guys, because I think this is the most complicated lecture, simply because skinning is always weird. So what we can do is change how those weights blend together. I'm going to go right click. I'm going to go to my Paint Skin Weights tool. So again, I'm just clicking on the mesh, and I'm holding right click, and I'm going up to Paint Skin Weights tool. And I'm showing you guys this way because it's so much faster compared to the alternative. The alternative is if I exit that tool, I just press W to exit that tool. The alternative is going up to Skin, Paint Skin Weights. Then you have to go in there. So it's kind of way slower that way. If you click on that tool and it's not showing up, you can always open your tool options at this top right button right here. So notice how I don't have that tool panel where it has all the joint lists in there. You can always go up to Show Hide Tools. Boom. All right. So we have a few joints in here. Our first is our root joint, but we also have this arm clavicle. So our root joint is going to have no weight on it, but our arm clavicle is going to be the start of everything, right? Because that's your clavicle is this one. It's in here. It's like it's the very root of that joint chain, right? So what we want to have is a little bit basically the way that this. If you look at this sort of heat map of what's controlling all these verts, you see that the shoulder controls everything kind of from the shoulder to the elbow. And then if I go into elbow, the elbow controls everything from the elbow to the wrist. So you can see how these joints are kind of setting up what they control. And our wrist is going to control everything from the wrist down to our knuckles. And our knuckles are going to control everything from the very start of the knuckle to the next digit. That's how these weights work. It's the same way that I showed you guys on like the legs of my character. The weight for the hip starts at the top of the hip down to the knee. Like the hip joint controls that region. So we want to use that sort of idea going forward, but I want to show you guys a more foolproof way to sort of get that weight going. So first step now that we have it bound is going to arm, clavicle, joint. And what I'm going to do is, let me save as first. Save as arm bound, because I bound the skin. Now let's just do bind skin so it's more clear. Arm bind skin. Boom, saved. Okay. So we're gonna click on this clavicle. And I want all of the weight from everything flooded to that clavicle now, right? So this wrist was originally controlling a little bit of this palm area. Now instead it's going to be controlling nothing, and it's going to be on that clav. And the way we do that is we click on arm, clavicle, joint. And we're going to go to add. And we're just going to do flood right here. It's that flood button. So arm, again, I'm just going to undo that. Arm, clavicle, joint in the paint operation area right here. Click add. And then make sure your opacity is at 1 and your value is at 1. And you're just going to flood. So now when we look at our skin, if we start moving a control around, see that nothing is bound to those joints. And instead we can rotate these, and we can move around our clavicle control, right? And look at that. So it's a 1-to-1 with that clavicle control. Now our next step is to start filling in the weight for the rest of these controls. So I'm going to click my mesh, and I'm going to hold right click and go to paint skin weights tool so I can see my skin weights again. And we need to go to arm, shoulder, joint. This joint right here. Don't go to joint FK, IK. Just go to arm, shoulder, joint. And then what we're going to do is select the verts that need that weight. And remember, I said the shoulder controls everything from the shoulder down to the wrist, to the elbow. So it's the shoulder to the elbow is what we're going to be controlling. What I like to do with this method instead is to kind of, we're going to select our verts from the clav down to just the rest of the arm. We're just going to select everything pretty much except for the clav in terms of verts. And the way we do that is we go into select geometry, or we can go into mode select right here. You can see that we have verts now. And I'm going to hold right click and go to vertex. And I'm going to go from this aerial view up here. And I'm going to drag select over everything except for these first verts right here. Right? And just to refresh, I went to mode. Instead of being on paint mode up here in my tool panel, I went to select mode. And I'm drag selecting over all the verts that I want to get, except for these ones, because these ones belong to the clavicle, right? So I want to leave those ones untouched. So I'm only messing with the rest of the verts. And I'm going to go back into paint mode in this little panel right here. Boom. And we're going to flood that. Boom. So now our gradient is like everything else is controlled by this shoulder joint, except for the clav. Clav controls these ones. So now let's look at how this moves. See how everything's bending with that shoulder joint now because we just flooded everything to that shoulder joint, right? See how it's all bending out there. It's following the way that this joint out here is going 1-to-1. That's looking good. Now I'm going to click on my mesh again. I'm just left clicking on my mesh. I'm going to paint skin weights tool again. Remember, that's holding right click on the mesh, paint skin weights tool. Now we need to find our elbow. And there's a bunch of confusing ones in here. I believe it is arm elbow joint is what we're looking for. This one right here. Boom. You see that? And see how in the viewport it highlights exactly which joint you're going to be binding skin to or adding influence to. And we're going to do the same process that we did for the arm. So I'm going to go to, or for the shoulder joint. So I'm going to go to select mode. I'm going to go to vertex. And I'm going to drag select everything from the elbow down now. Right there. So I'm drag selecting over everything from the elbow down. Remember, that's on select mode in here, not paint mode. And then we can switch back to paint mode. And with the arm elbow joint in the hierarchy selected, go to flood. Boom. So that's looking good. And we're going to do the same thing with the wrist. We're just going to select everything from the wrist down and then flood it. And we're going to do the same thing with the fingers as well. The only thing to keep in mind is that I believe the wrist joint you're looking to flood to is not wrist joint dummy. I think it's wrist joint right here. But let's see how our current weights look. So I'm going to click this little cube right here and then move that. See how the rest of this arm is following that joint's orientation right there. So as that joint rotates, it's pushing the rest of that mesh around. That's because we've completely flooded it to be controlled by this joint right there. And before I move on to the wrist, I'm just going to wait a little bit, make sure people can catch up if they're having problems. If you're having problems, just hit me up. Just type a message in the chat. Be like, Mike, how do we bind this joint or something? I don't know. Whatever question you have. I want to make sure no one gets left behind on this assignment because we don't have time to have people get left behind. I want to make sure everyone is able to follow this. All right. So I'm going to start flooding the skin weights for the wrist again, because we've already done the clavicle, shoulder, and the elbow. I'm going to go to paint skin weights tool. And you see that I'm going to select the arm wrist. If I go back and select that other elbow joint, we can see the weights that it has. Same with the other shoulder joint and the clav. So we're going to flood to this wrist joint. And if I hold right click, oh, Jonathan, I'm showing everyone how to do the arm rigging assignment. So if you're behind, I'm going step by step over the, oh, sorry, yeah, it's all good. I'm going step by step over the arm rigging assignment, because I was gonna go grade the rigs for the class, and it's about half the rigs were turned in. I want to make sure everyone else can get those completed and turned in, because I need something to grade in there. So I'm going over the steps. All right, got it. Yeah, I was gonna ask about it because the arm I downloaded was being weird. Okay. So what part are you on? Did you bind the arm to the joint hierarchy? I binded the arm. Okay, yeah. So you're not very far behind us. Sorry everyone, I'm going to go back and kind of show what we've done so far, because he already has it bound to the skin. So I'm going to hold right click. I'm going to go to Paint Skin Weights tool, and basically what we're doing is we're going to flood everything on this arm to the clavicle right here, this top joint in there. So what you're going to do is open up the Maya file. I'm going to wait for that to happen, if you don't have it popped open. And all that we're going to do is I left click the arm, I hold right click, go to Paint Skin Weights tool, and select this top node, this clavicle, because this clavicle is this chief joint at the very top of the hierarchy. And yours was acting weird. So specifically for you, I'm going to say for the paint operation, go to replace. Now, replace is going to just look at all the weights on your arm and be like, I don't care about that shit. And then it's just going to completely replace it with whatever this value and opacity are. So go to your clav, go to replace, go to opacity 1 and value 1. And what you're going to do is just flood everything. Boom. So now everything is bound to that clavicle. I'm sorry for everyone else. You can keep going with the wrist if you're feeling like you understand kind of how we're flooding these. And just to be clear, the clavicle, when we have these weights completely flooded to this skin, because we're going to go joint by joint and flood everything that we need on there. The clavicle is going to control everything from this inner chest area to this shoulder. And then the shoulder joint is going to control everything from the shoulder to the elbow. The elbow joint is going to control everything from the elbow to the wrist. Wrist can control everything from the wrist to the knuckles. That's going to be kind of how that heat map ends up looking. And you probably saw that when you first bound it, and it looked like kind of gray. Everything was a little bit gray, and it was a really big gradient. So we're kind of overriding that because I'm showing you guys the proper way to skin these things. So yeah, so bind everything to that clav, hold right click, Paint Skin Weights tool. And so we have everything flooded to the clav. If you don't remember how to do that, just with your object selected and in paint mode, we just clicked on the clav, replace, 1, 1, and then flood. Now the next step is going to the arm shoulder joint, just this next one on the list. Don't do arm shoulder joint FK or arm shoulder joint IK. Those are different nodes in that list if you have them. So just go to arm shoulder joint, and instead of just flooding, because that'll override the clavicles weight, right? We can't just flood the entire object. We have to specifically go into the verts that we want to flood to. So in this little mode here, we can go to select mode. So I'm going to click on select. Notice that our arm looks a little bit different now. It has our verts visible. Let's hold right click in here and go to vertex. Now, also make sure that your joints layer, because this is when it gets really annoying, is when you're trying to select a bunch of verts. Make sure your joints layer down here in your channel box is on reference. Make sure this little box right here says R. And you can just click on it to change what it shows. So click on this box that's the joint layer and make it reference. It has this little R in here. You can also just turn off the joints visually. I like to keep them on though, because you can see what you're selecting in this list as you go through. So that's pretty handy. So back to our flood filling. So switch over to select, and we're going to select all of the verts. Oops, I exited the tool, my bad. I'm going to go back to my paint skin weights tool. You're going to go to select mode, hold right click on your mesh, go to vertex, and I'm going to drag, select every vert from the shoulder down throughout the rest of the arm. And then we go back to paint mode. And I'm going to go switch this paint operation back to add. Make sure you do that. Go to add right there. And go to opacity. Make sure that's 1, value 1, flood. Boom. So now that shoulder joint, if you didn't have the shoulder joint selected there, undo, and then make sure you click on arm shoulder joint, and then you do add for all those verts. Now we do the same for the elbow. Go back to select and drag select over the verts from the elbow down, right? Because this elbow joint has to have control over all these arm verts, right? Because it's going to be moving those. So drag select from the top over all of those verts in there. And you can just press 4 to make sure you're selecting the right thing in there. And we're looking for the elbow joint. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to press 5 again. We're looking for the elbow joint, arm elbow joint. Notice when I click it, you can see that it's highlighting the correct joint in there. And then let's go back to paint. Go back to that paint layer, or that paint mode with the arm elbow joint selected. And we're going to do add, opacity 1, value 1. Boom. All right. So now we have those flooded in there, and you're back with the rest of the class. When we move this hand control around, you can see that it's pretty rudimentary, you know, because it's just completely 1 weight on here, 0 weight on the other ones. Like it's a stark fall off. You see how they're moving around there. If I enable wireframe on shaded, you can see that even better. You can see that they're 1-to-1 following those different joints that we set up. We need to get this wrist to follow. So I'm putting that back in its default pose. If you're struggling to get control back to its default sort of rotation and stuff, you can just go into your channel box, drag select over all of those values and just press 0. Boom. Except for scale. Don't input 0 on scale, because scale's default value is 1, like a 1-to-1 scale, you know. So now we need to flood fill for the hand and wrist. So I'm going to go click my mesh, hold right click, paint skin weights tool. We're going to go back to select mode. And I'm just going to drag select every vert from the wrist onward. And please keep following along, guys. I really want you guys to turn in these assignments. I really want to have everyone in the class be at the same level. So let's go to paint now. And we need to bind these verts, or we need to add their weights to arm wrist joint. It's this one in here. This one right here. Arm wrist joint. Don't do arm wrist joint dummy. Don't do arm wrist joint IK. Just arm wrist joint. Right there. And then make sure you're on paint mode. Add opacity 1, value 1, flood. Boom. And if I press 5, you can see that it flooded all of that weight onto the hand. At this point, I'm going to save, Control S. There we go. And you can see our wrist is now moving. Remember how our wrist originally was crumpling on this backside with that default bind? It was kind of pushing in really far. This is why we kind of separated out into that flood, right? Because we can get these really good fall offs that we can then kind of smooth out afterwards. So that's the entire point of flood filling as the first step. And we're going to do the same for the fingers. Go to the paint skin weights tool. So finger 01, and this is where it gets real tedious, guys. I know I've been going slow for some people, I'm sure, but I want to make sure everyone can keep up, no one gets left behind. For finger 01 joint, we need to select everything from this knuckle downward. So let's go back into our select mode. Right there. And then let's hold right click, make sure we're on vertex. There we go. I'm going to drag select from the bottom right all over that finger right there. Nice. And we can zoom in, and I can just press 4 to see through. Say I wanted to get a few more of these verts, right? Like I wanted to get some of this. Whoops. I can press Control. I can hold Control and Shift and left click drag to add to that selection, right? So I'm just going to add a few more because I want to get it. I want to select probably up to that knuckle in there, right? So let's Shift select, and let's go into 5 mode again so we can see our shaded arm. See what I selected there? I selected everything from just kind of this crease in here onward. And let's go to our finger 01 joint. Make sure you're binding to the correct one because they just named them finger 2, finger 3. That's why I like having this visualization on for the joints. So finger 01, you can see that you're selecting that in your painting menu. And go to paint mode, paint, and then flood that. Boom. So that's 1-to-1 now on there with the weights. So if we select our control now, and then we go into rotate mode, you can see moving that finger around. And remember with the default bind, it was too soft. Like when you rotated up this knuckle, it would push up on like the interior of the palm, which is not right. We want to isolate that we want to isolate the weights of that area to this knuckle. All right, and then we're gonna do the same for each individual digit now. And I'm sorry, it's gonna be pretty tedious going through here. If you're getting the hang of this, you can feel free to go faster, but I wanna make sure I'm going at a nice, easy rate to follow. So we have fingers 01, second digit. We're gonna go to select and make sure you're in vertex mode. I'm gonna press 4 just so I can see all the verts. I'm gonna drag select through to get everything on that joint. Then I'm gonna go back to paint. And I'm gonna make sure I'm on joint 2. Go back to paint mode, flood, right there. Next, I'm going to do the same for this last finger joint. We don't bind anything to finger joint 4, it's just this tip joint. Go to finger 01, 03, and press 4. Go back into select mode. Drag select over these verts that are starting from the verts that are starting on that last digit right there to the very end. And let's find that in the hierarchy again. Finger 01, 03. Go back into your paint menu and press 5 just to see it happen. Add opacity 1, value 1, flood. There we go. So now I'm going to press W just to get out of that tool. And we can select these controls in here now. And we can rotate them. You can see that that hand moves with those, right? That hand completely moves, or those fingers verts move completely with that control. For posing around fingers like this, I like to hold E and left click and make sure I'm on object mode. So notice how when I rotate these, they kind of rotate to the side a little bit too. Like we don't bend our fingers back that way naturally. We kind of go along that kind of go along the middle plane of that finger, you know. So in order to do that, just hold E, left click, object mode. So now my manipulator aligned with the object of that knuckle versus the world. So see if I zoom in here, switch over to object, boom, you can see the difference. Look at my manipulator down there. So one version is aligned to the joint, other it's not. So I always like posing these in object mode. Notice how it rotates a lot easier with the finger. Oh my God. Why are my email notifications so loud? All right. So there we go. We have that rotating now. Very nice, very nice. Now we have to do that with all the fingers. Like I said, pretty tedious, yeah. But repetition is how we get these skills locked down. So I'm gonna go to object mode. I'm gonna hold right click, paint skin weights tool. And we're gonna be working on finger 2 now. That's the middle finger. And you're gonna go to select mode, hold right click, vertex. I'm gonna start going up a little bit in speed because we have seen this process now. Since we're working on that middle finger, select all the verts of that middle finger up to that knuckle. And I'm just going into 4 mode, and I'm pressing Control and Shift to add to this selection to kind of add these little straggling vertex or vertices. That's looking good. I might get this one too in there, and this one. I'm just Control Shift left clicking on them. And I'm getting all of these. Might as well get some of this crease in here too for that middle finger. Oops. Make sure you're not selecting vertices way far in the back. Make sure you're getting all the proper ones. I'm gonna get some of these too. Nice. All right, and then once you get that selection ready, you're gonna go to finger 02, 01 in your list, paint mode, and just make sure you have that proper one selected before we flood, and flood. Bang, right there. Nice. Now we can do the same thing with finger 02, go back into select mode, vertex. We're gonna grab everything from that that digit, not knuckle. I guess that's just a digit. We're gonna grab everything from that digit downward. Finger 02, go into paint mode, flood. Then we're gonna go into finger 02, 03, select mode, and I'm just drag selecting through that finger. I'm gonna make sure I like to flood these with everything kind of limited to that edge loop right there across the finger, rather than having like one rogue vert on there that it got accidentally selected. I like to keep it clean like this, have a nice even fall off there. And we're gonna go back to paint mode. Finger, because we're on the second finger now, the middle finger, and we're on the third joint, or the third digit, so we're looking for finger 02, 03, joint, paint, flood. Boom. So that's another finger done. And we're gonna fix this, hard fall off in a little bit. So once we get everything flooded to all these digits, that's when we start smoothing those weights out. So, but first we need to get everything else flooded. So I'm going back to the paint skin weights tool. We're gonna work on finger 3 now. So click your finger 3 in this joint list. You can see it right here. And we're doing the process of selecting all those verts again. So go into mode, select. I'm gonna hold right click over the over the mesh and go to vertex. And drag selecting over these verts. Right? And remember, if you're struggling with selecting all this stuff, it's because you probably don't have your joints layer on there. Because if I turn joints layer off of reference, selecting gets a lot more annoying. When you're trying to select verts, it'll just be selecting the joints instead. And you're like, no, I don't want that. I want to mess with those, Maya. So yeah, make sure your joints are on a reference layer in here. And I'm just gonna press 4, and I'm going to do Control-Shift-Drag to add to the selection. I'm adding all these up to the knuckle. Trying to get all that in there. That looks good to me. Looks like a good selection. And I might have, this one's a little bit out there, so I'm gonna Control left click that one to remove it. And I might add these two in here. So I just Control Shift left clicking those. So now we have all those fingers in there, or all those finger vertices in there. And we need to go back to paint mode. We're looking for finger 03, joint 1, this one right here. And we're just doing add, opacity 1, value 1 right there. And I have a video of this on YouTube called My Simple Way of Skinning. You can find it linked on Beachboard content. It goes over this, so if you're still getting lost, you can always refresh that, or you can always hit me up. Please ask me questions. So now we need to flood to joint 2 of that finger right here. Because right now, if we move any of these joints, they're not going to be moving anything because they don't have any weight. They're not controlling anything. What's controlling them right now is this joint up here. You can see when I move it, it moves the rest of that finger. So we need to do the rest. We need to paint the rest of these weights or flood them. We're not really painting yet. So we go to finger 03, the second digit, mode paint. Oh wait, select, and we need to go to vertex mode. Because if you flood without a selection, it's going to flood your entire arm to that. We need to flood to specific vertices. So let's drag select over these verts. Let's go into 4 mode to make sure we're not selecting any other crazy verts on the other side that we can see. It's looking good. I'm going to go back into 5 mode by just pressing 5. We can go back into paint mode. Add opacity 1, value 1, flood. There, cool. Very cool. And let's go to finger 0303. So remember, when we're flooding to these kind of joints that are further down the chain, it's stealing that weight away from that finger, right? Because that finger originally had the entire length of weight. But now since we added that weight instead onto the joint in front of it, that joint in front of it stole all that weight, right? And that's how we've been getting these nice fall-offs right here, right? To make sure, it's basically, this step is we're trying to isolate all the weight onto these joints to make sure stuff like the spine is not controlling like the wrist, you know, like this is what that step is trying to prevent. And I'm sure if you tried to rig your character, you probably ran into a lot of that where it's like, oh man, why is the foot controlling this? Like, what the hell? So that's what we're trying to get around by flooding everything in that first step. So finger 0302. And we're going to need to select everything for finger 03, that last digit there. So select, vertex, I'm dragging over those. And I'm just getting this out of there. So we have all those verts of that fingertip in the selection. Go back to paint mode. And then add. Make sure you have the right joint selected. Don't do this finger joint 4. Remember, those last joints in the chain are just some placeholder ones. We don't really bind anything to those. So finger 0303. Add. Flood right there. And oops, I had a little piece of this finger selected. Now that's not too much of a problem for us right now because we're just going to fill over the rest of that anyways. But if we wanted to, we could just, oops. We could go back into our, oh wait, shit. Let me file save scene as first. Scan 2. Oh man. Okay, so we're gonna need to go in and flood fill these verts again. Whoops. Oh my God. All right, so let's open our skin again. There we go. Everything working now, Maya? No. Go back to our paint skin weights tool. And it threw a lot of those verts kind of back to the origin. So we need to just select those verts again. Let's go to select mode. What the hell? All right. I'm just going to select them in this viewport. Never had Maya mess up weights like that before. I'm going to first edit, delete all by type, non-deformer history. There we go. Okay. Let's see if that actually fixed it. No. Okay. Edit, delete all by type, non-deformer history. Huh. Yeah. Jonathan, when you were doing your skinning, was it behaving strangely like this as well, or no? Like, was it? Did you ever Control Z and it just threw your verts like this across the? No, I didn't. Oh, weird. Cool. So that's just on my file only. I like it. So I'm just selecting the verts of that displaced one in here. Yeah, because I don't want you guys to not be able to Control Z. Like, that's really bad. Selecting all these messed up verts. Sorry, guys. Bear with me, please. All right. So that's everything for that last digit. And I'm going to go hold right click, paint skin weights with those verts selected. I'm going to flood. And go to paint. Flood right there. And let's make sure that that's not broken forever now. Okay, cool, cool. Let's make sure it's working again. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. All right. If you're following along with me, sorry about that. Like it just sometimes the weights get messed up like that. I can see that I have one vert that's like a little bit messed up still in there somewhere that I'll need to fix. Same with this. But I'm going to save. Let's make sure we save often with this. And I'm going to select that vert in there. I think it's only that vert. I'm going to hold right click, paint skin weights, and then flood to get that back on there. So yeah, if you're following along, please go to edit. Make sure we save before you do this. Delete all by type, non-deformer history. We don't want to delete history, just non-deformer history. And we're going to do the same thing for, oh wait, let's make sure that we did I don't think we did this last digit here. Let's check it. We're just clicking on that control and then rotating it. No, so we still need to flood to this last digit here. So let's click on the hand, paint skin weights tool. We're going to go into select mode, and I'm going to select the verts for that last fingertip. And let's find the right joint in here. Let's go to paint mode again. We're going to finger 03. All right, and flood. There we go. Now let's make sure that that's working by rotating this last one again. Nice. All right, so everything seems to be working again. Nothing is super broken. And I'm going to Control-Shift-S. That's to save as. You can always just go to File, Save As at the top as well. Do an arm, bind skin 3. All right, so now we need to do the last hand, or the last finger. So hold right click, go to Paint Skin Weights tool. I'm doing finger 4, select, make sure you're in select mode. Holding right click, go to verts. I'm selecting the verts of that last pinky. Just Control Shift to add to the selection here. I'm doing Control Shift, and just dragging over those. I'm getting the inside of this finger as well. There. Nice. All right. Then we can go back to paint mode. Let's find our joint in the list. Finger 04. That's what we're looking for. Flood. Oh, I missed a little bit of that selection, so I can go back into select mode. I wouldn't chance undo with how it treated us last time, so go to select mode, and then paint mode, and I can just flood those. I can also just select the object at this point and go into paint mode. And with a hard-edged circle brush right here, I can just paint over the top of this and just add to that. And you can potentially do that for all of your fingers as well. Like you can just click on the finger joint and paint over it. But I like to be precise with this. That's why I always go back into select mode, vertex mode, select the verts, go back to paint mode, and then flood. Boom. See that? So that's why I like to do it. It's a little bit faster than like navigating your camera all around that finger, selecting everything. So I'm going back into select mode for this tip, this fingertip right here. Looking for finger joint 4, 03, and we're doing flood on that as well. So now all of our controls rotate right there with this. And I think these have some curl controls on here. Yeah, so now you can see the hand moving in there. Looks like we missed some interior ones. That's fine. We'll just smooth those out later, because those are currently probably bound to the hand, right? Because we flood filled the entire hand there. All right. So everyone that's doing this process, is anyone running into problems? Does anyone need a little bit of time? Because I'm going to flood fill the thumb, and then I'm going to start smoothing joints. Hopefully we can be done before 6. That would be very cool. Anyone need me to go slower? Anyone need me to speed up? Just want to make sure no one's getting left behind. Wait, my 4th joint on my finger won't move the whole finger. Yeah, so this last one, right? This one right here, I'm guessing you're talking about, Kristen? This one right here, that doesn't control anything. because we only flooded to this last one because that's where that digit rotates from, you know, right there. That tip, it's a little bit misleading because it's like, what is that for? What that's for is I believe it's commonly used for IK targets. So like if you like as an animator, like if you want to really get some precise like contact with like a face or something, if you enable IK on a rig that handles it, then you can just put that joint right to the face, and then like that face could move around, and you could just move your hand and have that contact be clean still. So that's what it's for, if you were wondering. But yeah, for now, like for our purposes though, we just leave no weight on those. We don't bind anything to those. Right there. Okay. Nice, nice. Kristen, do you need more time getting your fingers going before we get the thumb? It's fine. Like don't. If you need more time, just let me know. It's more important that I help everyone get to the same level. No, I finished the fingers. Okay, sweet, sweet. If anyone else needs more time, like before we keep moving on, let me know, because I don't want anyone getting left out of the assignment. All right, so I'm going to do the thumbnail. I'm going to hold right click, go to paint skin weights. Let's go to thumb 01, joint 1. I'm going to go to select now. I'm going to hold right click, go to vertex, and drag selecting over all of these. And I'm going to press 4 again just to see through it. And that back thumb joint kind of sits right there, right? Kind of out pops. So it needs control of a lot of this like sort of meat of the hand. So let's go in, and I'm just going to control shift left click drag out there. See, I'm just getting a big area of that selected. And I want a few more of these verts in here too, so I'm just control shift dragging and getting a lot of that in there. There we go. All right, the thumb is going to look nasty when we do this, and we rotate it. So click the thumb, go into paint mode. Let's make sure we're still on the thumb in here. And I'm just going to add 1 opacity, 1 value, flood. Oh. And there you go. So it needs control over most of that now. Now we need to do this sort of, this joint right here, right? We have to get that one in there. So what we're going to do is go back into select, hold right click vertex, and we're just going to drag select everything in here. There we go. All right. I'm going to get that out of there. Let's go back into 5. We're going to go to paint. And I'm going to go to thumb 02 joint. I'm going to flood that. Boom. And the final joint in here, I see that I misplaced it a little bit when I was creating the rig. That's fine. It should still work the same because it's just that tip joint that doesn't really control anything. We need to flood to this joint. So let's go back to select, go into vertex, and I'm going to select all those verts inside that thumb. Just that end, last digit in there. I'm just Control Shift selecting in there. And I'm gonna press 5 and move around the outside of it, make sure I'm getting all those verts. Nice. Let's go into Paint. And then let's navigate down, make sure we're on the 3rd joint in there. And we're going to flood. Whoops. We're going to flood. Boom. Right there. Now let's move our controls around. See what we got cooking. There we go. Nice. So this is all looking good now. The thumb is going to look pretty weird because it's going to crumple in on that main part, and it's going to pull out really hard on here, you know. All right, so we have everything flood filled. I'm going to go Control Shift S or File Save Scene As. Arm, bind, skin. Let's do flooded, I guess, just so we know. So we have a really good solid flood. And the reason we do that is to limit where that influence is, and we know 100% where it is, because we're going to do a lot of smoothing now, and during that process it can kind of get confusing, but it's also way better than that initial default Maya skin bind, because we don't know where Maya put those weights. Like I've seen them put like the head on like the body and all that stuff. So like this is what we're trying to mitigate and kind of stop from happening. So if you, hopefully you guys are finishing up the fingers and thumb. I'm gonna get some more water so my voice doesn't explode. And I'll be back in just a second to start smoothing these weights out. All right. We are back. Before moving on, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone need me to go over something again? And is everyone have their values flooded? Like when you go through your list, does it just look like the white? Kristen says yes, good to go. All right. Please, if you need more time or anything, then let me know. All right. So now our problem is that when we sort of rotate or when we move this stuff around, we have this super harsh fall off in here. And I just have the wireframe displayed for you guys. But you guys probably on your guys' side, it probably looks like this. I kind of like working with the wireframe on shaded. If you're curious about it too, you can find it up here. Wireframe on shaded button right here. It's just at the top of the little viewport, and it just looks like a little cube with little highlights on the edges. So you can work like this. And I like doing that because you can really precisely see where each of these like edges are. So now what we need to do is get this fall off to be less severe. So like this wrist, it looks like it's kind of like broken a little bit. We need to kind of smooth those values out. And that's where a lot of the complications can come from. And that's why I like to work with this flood fill method, because it kind of gets your values in a good place before doing a lot of that crazy stuff. So let's do translate. Let's just zero this out, this control over here. And let's start with, since the clavicle doesn't control much, let's start with the elbow. So look at how that elbow controls right there. I'm just gonna leave it a little bit bent for now. And let's click on our skin, paint skin weights. Actually, first I'm going to file, save, just because I'm paranoid and I don't want you guys to lose any sort of progress. I'm going to go hold right click, paint skin weights tool. And now is when we start paying attention to locking your skin weights down. So we're worried about how this shoulder joint and elbow joint, right? Because those are the two joints that are controlling this area. You see, we want the fall off between the elbow joint and the shoulder joint to be smoother, right? Because it's just the shoulders controlling everything and then nothing for this. We want it to kind of be a gradient in there, like more like when we default bound, but not as smooth as that, because the default bind kind of leaves a lot to be desired. So what we need to do before we start smoothing is let's click the arm shoulder joint. Where's the control to move the elbow? Oh yeah. So if you're looking for it, it's this cube. I just grabbed that cube and then moved it around, and its default position is fully extended out here. But yeah, so I just moved that a little bit back. Nice, nice. Thank you for asking questions. Paint skin weights tool. Go back into that. So what we need to do is click your shoulder joint and then right click, do lock inverse selection. And when you do that, look at this left column of little padlock icons. Lock inverse selection, boom. See how that locked everything down? That's telling Maya to not touch any of the weights associated with that. So we locked down the shoulder, and if I were to go into add in paint mode now, and if I started just painting over this, it looks like it's adding it, right? But if I click off of it, click onto it, Maya's like, "Heh, I know that everything else besides that shoulder was locked down, so those joints are holding onto their weight." And the reason that's really important is because if you smooth without the proper joint, if you smooth with every joint unlocked, when you're smoothing like the gradient between the elbow, it could be adding that weight to like the wrist, to like the fingers, to everything. So we need to be very specific. And we're working with the shoulder and the elbow joint right now. Sorry, my desk is being weird. 1 second. We're working with the arm, the shoulder, and the elbow right here. So we're looking for shoulder joint, elbow joint, and unblock the elbow joint and the shoulder joint. Boom. And we're ready to smooth. So now with either the arm or the shoulder joint selected, we can just do smooth. And let's keep it with a value of 1. And we're going to start painting these weights now, actually. So you can hold B and left click drag to kind of increase or decrease this fall off. I'm going to use just this middle size. And I like to smooth on the black parts first because I find Maya handles it better. So let's just start left click dragging over this. So I like just smoothing these parts that don't have any weight on it. Boom. right there. And we can do it again. We can smooth a lot in here and get some nice spread out, even weight in here. Nice. So now when we bend it, hey Mike, how do you adjust the brush size? Yeah. So if I left click, or if I go back to my paint skin weights tool, the hotkey to adjust a brush size is B and then left click drag. That adjusts that sort of size of it. Okay. You can also go to, I believe, stroke and then change this radius. But I don't know. I like hotkeys because it speeds it up. It makes us faster as artists. So we can smooth these out. And now when I bend that elbow, it's not as much of a fall off. You see that? It's not like crumpling into itself. It does when I get to these extreme parts right here. So you might want to move your elbow, or you might want to move that hand even a little bit closer, and then go back in here. We can paint skin weights tool, and it remembered what we had locked down and selected, so we can just go back in and start smoothing again in here. Some of these like super white values get like eye piercing to look at. So if you want to look at these differently, you can use the color ramp in here, and it just makes it a lot more visible. Makes it a lot more visible to deal with. Like, so yeah, feel free to do that. I also like using not completely one opacity on this smoothing. I like to take it a little bit slower, you know. It makes it a lot more, you have a lot more finite control over it, and that's going to come into play a lot when we're dealing with like our fingers and stuff like that. I'm just smoothing this in. We can just smooth this too, because I feel like its shape looks a little bit too jagged in there, so I'm just gonna get that a little bit smooth. Right there. Nice. So we can keep on smoothing a little bit. Smooth to your desired amount. And now when we bend that elbow, it's looking good. That's looking spicy now. Like, of course, like you can't get it perfect because, like, look at this. Like, you can bend this, but like, can you even get your arm in real life to that pose? No. Like, your skin does fold into itself a little bit in there, but like, it's like it's preventing you from getting super compact in there. So there's always limitations. We can't get it to be perfect. But yeah, so there we go. And I just zeroed out that last control. Now we want to work on the weights for the wrist, right? Does anyone have any questions about smoothing? Remember the process, I'm just gonna go over it again, is to lock everything down besides the two joints that you're smoothing between. So everything in this list is completely locked besides those two joints. And Maya knows, like, hey, we're not touching the weight on any of these other joints, just these two. And it can start smoothing that way. So